This is the shocking true story of David Morgan, a 40-year-old executive whose life was turned upside down when his affair with a colleague spiraled into a nightmare of betrayal and revenge. Despite being happily married for 15 years with 2 wonderful children, David made the terrible mistake of starting a relationship with Rebecca Taylor, an ambitious 32-year-old marketing coordinator at his company. What began as innocent flirtation quickly developed into a full-blown affair, with David risking everything for stolen moments with Rebecca. What David didn't realize was that Rebecca had calculated every step of their relationship, documenting their intimate encounters with secret photos and saving their private messages. When David hesitated to leave his family, Rebecca executed her devastating revenge, sending the bedroom photos directly to his wife Sarah. "I trusted you completely," Sarah told him through tears as she showed him the explicit evidence Rebecca had sent. The divorce papers followed quickly, and David found himself facing the loss of everything that truly mattered in his life. Desperate to save his marriage, David worked tirelessly to prove his remorse was genuine. Through counseling, complete transparency, and unwavering commitment, he slowly began to rebuild Sarah's trust, a process that would take months of painful honesty. Meanwhile, at work, Rebecca continued to threaten and manipulate him. When David overheard her bragging about targeting married executives for financial gain, he realized he hadn't been her first victim. With Sarah's support, David took a bold step, presenting all the evidence of Rebecca's predatory behavior to the company's CEO. The resulting investigation revealed Rebecca's pattern of workplace sexual harassment and blackmail attempts against multiple married executives. She was immediately terminated, while David faced appropriate but less severe consequences for his role in the inappropriate workplace relationship. 5 years later, the Morgan family has emerged stronger from this ordeal. David never forgot the lesson he learned the hard way, that a moment of weakness can nearly destroy a lifetime of happiness, but with genuine remorse and dedicated effort, even broken trust can be repaired. This cautionary tale serves as a powerful reminder of the destructive power of workplace affairs and the redemptive potential of taking responsibility for our mistakes. David Morgan sat at his desk, staring blankly at his computer screen. At 40 years old, he had what many would consider a successful life, a high-paying position as regional sales director at TechVision Industries, a beautiful home in the suburbs, 2 wonderful children, and Sarah, his wife of 15 years. Yet for the past 3 months, he had been risking it all for stolen moments with Rebecca Taylor, the 32-year-old marketing coordinator who had joined the company last year. It had started innocently enough, late nights working on the Ferguson project, casual lunches discussing strategies, text messages that gradually shifted from professional to personal. Rebecca was attentive, ambitious, and made David feel alive in ways he hadn't experienced in years. Meeting in the conference room at 5:30. Rebecca's message flashed on his phone, followed by a winking emoji. David glanced at the family photo on his desk, Sarah and their 2 children, Emma, 12, and Jack, 9, smiling during last summer's beach vacation. A knot formed in his stomach, the same one that appeared every time he thought about what he was doing. Yet he still typed back, "I'll be there." What David didn't know was that Rebecca had grown increasingly frustrated with their arrangement. She had initially been thrilled by the attention from a senior executive, seeing it both as an exciting romance and potentially beneficial for her career. But David's reluctance to leave his family and his insistence on keeping their relationship secret at work had begun to wear on her. That evening in the empty conference room, as David straightened his tie afterward, Rebecca watched him with narrowed eyes. "When are you going to tell Sarah about us?" she asked, not for the first time. David sighed. "Becca, we've talked about this. It's complicated. The kids. It's always complicated." "It's always about the kids," Rebecca interrupted. "I'm starting to think you're never going to leave her." "I just need more time," David said weakly, knowing himself that he had no real intention of leaving his family. Rebecca nodded slowly, a cold determination forming behind her eyes that David completely missed. "Sure, David. Take all the time you need." The following Tuesday started like any normal day. David kissed Sarah goodbye, dropped the kids at school, and headed to the office. Around noon, his phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, we need to talk. Come home now. There was something in the terseness of the message that sent a chill down his spine. He made an excuse about a client emergency and drove home, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. When he arrived, Sarah was sitting at the kitchen table, her face pale and strained. In front of her was her phone. "Sarah, what's wrong?" he asked, although a part of him already knew. Without speaking, Sarah turned her phone toward him. On the screen was a series of images, intimate photos of him and Rebecca that he hadn't even known were taken, along with screenshots of text messages between them. "Her name is Rebecca, apparently," Sarah said, her voice frighteningly calm. "She thought I should know what my husband has been doing at those late meetings." David felt the blood drain from his face. "Sarah, I can explain." "Explain what, David?" "How you've been sleeping with a colleague while I've been at home taking care of our children. How you've been lying to my face for months." "It was a mistake," he began, desperation creeping into his voice. "It didn't mean anything. It meant enough for you to risk our marriage, our family." Sarah stood up, tears finally breaking through her composed facade. "I've already called a lawyer. I want you out of this house by tonight." David's world collapsed around him. The reality of what he stood to lose hit him with the force of a physical blow: his children, his home, the woman who had stood by him for 15 years. "Please, Sarah," he begged, "don't do this. Give me a chance to make it right." "Make it right?" Sarah's laugh was hollow. "That woman sent me pictures of you in bed together. She detailed exactly how long it's been going on. She even mentioned the weekend you told me you were at a conference in Denver, when apparently you were with her." David sank into a chair, his legs no longer able to support him. Rebecca had documented everything, clearly planning this moment of revenge for some time. "The worst part," Sarah continued, "is that I had no idea. I trusted you completely." Her voice broke on the last word. In that moment, looking at his wife's shattered expression, David felt something shift inside him. The fog of his infatuation with Rebecca cleared, revealing the magnitude of his betrayal and the precious things he had taken for granted. "Sarah, I know I don't deserve it, but please, let me try to fix this. For Emma and Jack, if nothing else." Sarah wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "The kids are exactly why I'm ending this, David. I won't have them growing up with a father who treats commitment like it's optional." As she walked out of the kitchen, David remained at the table, staring at the damning evidence on Sarah's phone. The calculated nature of Rebecca's actions became clear: she hadn't just exposed the affair, she had compiled and preserved evidence, waiting for the perfect moment to detonate his life. And she had succeeded. The next 2 weeks were the most painful of David's life. He moved into a depressing one-bedroom apartment near the office. Sarah had her lawyer draft divorce papers. The children, confused and hurt, barely spoke to him during his scheduled visits. At work, the atmosphere was unbearable. Though Rebecca and David maintained a professional distance, her knowing smirks when they passed in the hallway made it clear she was enjoying his suffering. He wondered how many of their colleagues knew or suspected what had happened. One night, alone in his sparse apartment, David hit rock bottom. Looking at a photo of Emma and Jack on his phone, he broke down completely. The reality of potentially becoming a weekend father, of missing his children's daily lives, of losing the family he had taken for granted, it crushed him. That same night, Sarah sat alone in their home after putting the children to bed. Though still deeply hurt and angry, she found herself thinking about the 15 years they had shared. Despite David's betrayal, those years had been largely happy ones. He had been a good father, present for school events, soccer games, and bedtime stories. Was she really ready to dissolve their family over one terrible mistake, regardless of how painful? The next morning, David called Sarah, expecting to discuss logistics for picking up the children. "I've been thinking," Sarah said, her voice guarded. "Maybe we should talk before we move forward with the divorce. For the kids' sake." A fragile hope bloomed in David's chest. "I'd like that very much. They agreed to meet with a marriage counselor, a neutral third party who could help them navigate the damaged terrain of their relationship. In their first session, David spoke with complete honesty for the first time in months. "I was selfish and weak," he admitted, looking directly at Sarah. "There's no excuse for what I did. But I love you and our children more than anything in this world, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to rebuild what I've broken, if you'll give me that chance." Sarah remained skeptical but acknowledged her own willingness to consider reconciliation. "I'm not making any promises," she told him. "But for the sake of our history and our children, I'm willing to see if there's anything here worth saving." The counselor suggested a temporary reconciliation period. David would move back into the guest room, they would continue therapy, and Sarah would have complete access to David's phone, email, and schedule as a step toward rebuilding trust. David agreed to everything without hesitation. He would have agreed to far more stringent conditions if it meant a chance to save his marriage. As David worked to rebuild trust with Sarah, his perspective on his affair with Rebecca shifted dramatically. What he had perceived as passion and connection now appeared hollow and manipulative. He began to see patterns he'd missed before, how Rebecca had pursued him initially, how she had steadily pushed for more commitment, how she had documented their relationship from the beginning. At work, Rebecca's behavior became increasingly erratic. When she realized David was working to reconcile with his wife, she began sending him threatening messages. "Your wife should know this isn't the first time you've strayed," one message read, though this was a complete fabrication. "Maybe I should forward those pictures to HR as well," said another. David saved every message but didn't respond, instead sharing them with Sarah in a painful but necessary exercise in transparency. "She's trying to manipulate you," Sarah observed after reading the latest threat. Though still hurt, she was beginning to see Rebecca more clearly for who she was. "I know that now," David replied. "I just wish I'd seen it sooner." Then came the final revelation. While working late, David overheard a conversation between Rebecca and another colleague in the break room. "I almost had him," Rebecca was saying. David was this close to leaving his wife. "Do you know what that would have meant? Alimony, child support, he makes 3 times what I do." "So this was about money?" the colleague asked, sounding surprised. Rebecca laughed. "Not entirely. The sex was good, and a VP position would have eventually been part of the package. David's not the first married executive I've targeted, just the first who didn't follow through." David stood frozen outside the door, the full extent of Rebecca's calculation washing over him. This hadn't been about attraction or connection, he had been a financial and professional target from the beginning. For the first time since the affair's exposure, David felt something beyond shame and regret. He felt anger, not just at Rebecca, but at himself for being so easily manipulated, for risking everything that truly mattered for someone who had seen him as nothing but a resource to exploit. That evening, David shared his discovery with Sarah during one of their now regular honest conversations. "She planned the whole thing," he said, still processing the revelation himself. "She's apparently done this before." Sarah was silent for a long moment. "That doesn't excuse what you did, David." "I know," he agreed quickly. "The choices were still mine. I'm just finally seeing the situation clearly." After another therapy session, Sarah made her decision. "I want to try to make our marriage work," she told David. "Not because of what you've told me about Rebecca, but because of what I've seen from you these past weeks. Real remorse, real effort." The relief David felt was overwhelming. "I promise you won't regret this," he said, meaning every word. "I'll spend the rest of my life making this up to you." "I'm not doing this for you," Sarah clarified. "I'm doing it for me, for our children, for the 15 years we built together that I'm not ready to throw away." With his family cautiously reuniting, David turned his attention to the professional situation. Rebecca's threats had continued, and he knew it was only a matter of time before she escalated further. After careful consideration and discussion with Sarah, David decided to approach the matter head-on. He requested a meeting with James Harrison, the CEO of TechVision Industries. "I've made a serious error in judgment," David began once they were seated in Harrison's office. He proceeded to explain the affair with Rebecca, not minimizing his own culpability but also sharing the evidence of her pattern of targeting married executives and her subsequent threats. Harrison listened without interruption, his expression grave. When David finished, he sighed heavily. "I appreciate your honesty, David. This is obviously a serious situation on multiple levels. I understand if my position at the company is untenable," David said. "But I felt you should know the full story, especially given Rebecca's history." Harrison nodded slowly. "Let me think about how to proceed. In the meantime, I'd like you to forward me those threatening messages and any other evidence you have." David did as requested, providing the documentation without editorial comment. What happened next would be out of his hands, but he had taken the first step toward addressing the professional fallout of his personal mistakes. 3 days later, David was called back to Harrison's office. To his surprise, the company's head of HR, Patricia Washington, was also present. "We've conducted a thorough investigation," Harrison began, "including interviews with other employees and a review of company communications." David nodded, preparing himself for termination. "What you did was inappropriate and violated our company's code of conduct regarding workplace relationships," Patricia stated firmly. "Under normal circumstances, this would result in immediate termination." "I understand," David replied. "However," Harrison continued, "we've uncovered some disturbing information about Ms. Taylor's behavior, both in your case and with at least 2 other executives at previous companies. Her actions constitute sexual harassment and creating a hostile work environment." David listened as they explained that Rebecca had been terminated effective immediately, with security escorting her from the building that morning. "As for you, David," Harrison said, his tone serious, "you'll be placed on probation for 6 months. You'll also be required to complete an extensive workplace ethics course. Your year-end bonus is forfeit, and you'll be reassigned to the Seattle office for the time being." The consequences were significant but far less severe than David had expected. "I understand and accept these terms," he said. "One more thing," Patricia added. "We'd like you to speak with our legal team about filing a formal complaint against Ms. Taylor. The threatening messages you shared constitute blackmail." David agreed to cooperate, though he had no desire to prolong the situation. His focus remained on rebuilding his marriage and family life. The 6 months that followed were challenging but transformative for David and Sarah. With continued therapy, complete transparency, and dedicated effort from both of them, their marriage slowly began to heal. David's commute to the Seattle office was difficult, but he viewed it as a small price to pay for the second chance he'd been given. Each evening, he would video call with Emma and Jack, helping them with homework and remaining present in their lives despite the physical distance. On weekends, the family worked to rebuild their bonds. There were still difficult moments, times when Sarah would remember the betrayal and withdraw emotionally, times when the children would ask why things had changed. But there were also moments of genuine connection and joy that gave David hope for their future. At work, David channeled his energy into rebuilding his professional reputation. He excelled at the Seattle office, mentoring younger employees and bringing in significant new business. His probation ended with a positive evaluation and an option to return to the main office. "I'd rather stay in Seattle for now," David told Harrison during their review meeting. "The separation has been difficult for my family, but the commute has actually given me time to reflect and prioritize. I'd like to continue on this path." Harrison seemed impressed by the change in David. "You've handled this situation with more integrity than how it began," he observed. "The Seattle team speaks highly of your work. The position there can be permanent if you'd prefer." 1 year after the affair's exposure, David and Sarah renewed their wedding vows in a small ceremony attended only by their children and parents. It was Sarah's idea, a symbolic fresh start for their marriage. "This past year has been the hardest of my life," Sarah said during the ceremony. "But it's also taught me that love isn't perfect. It's a choice we make every day, even when it's difficult, even when we've been hurt." David, holding back tears, responded, "I made the worst mistake of my life when I betrayed you. But you gave me the chance to learn what love truly means, not just passion or convenience, but commitment, honesty, and the daily work of building a life together. I promise to honor this second chance for the rest of our days." As for Rebecca, David heard through former colleagues that she had struggled to find employment after being terminated, especially once her pattern of behavior became known in professional circles. The legal consequences of her attempted blackmail further complicated her situation. David felt no satisfaction in her downfall. He recognized that his own poor choices had created the opportunity for manipulation, regardless of Rebecca's intentions. 2 years after the affair, the Morgan family relocated permanently to Seattle for a fresh start. David had been promoted to vice president of West Coast operations, a position that allowed him more flexibility to be present for his family. One evening, as he helped Jack with a science project while Sarah and Emma prepared dinner, David took a moment to appreciate the life he had nearly lost. The affair had been a painful chapter in their story, but it had ultimately led to a stronger, more honest relationship. He had learned the hardest way possible what truly mattered, and he would never take it for granted again. 5 years after the affair, David received an unexpected email from Rebecca. She had moved to another state, undergone therapy, and was attempting to make amends as part of her recovery process. After consulting with Sarah, David replied with a brief message acknowledging her apology and wishing her well in her journey toward healthier relationships. He felt no lingering anger, only a distant sadness for the pain they had all experienced. The Morgan family continued to thrive in Seattle. Emma and Jack grew into teenagers who, though not untouched by their family's difficult period, had witnessed the power of forgiveness and the possibility of rebuilding trust after betrayal. Sarah had returned to school and completed a degree in counseling, inspired by the therapist who had helped save their marriage. She now worked part-time helping other couples navigate relationship crises. David maintained his commitment to transparency and integrity, both at home and in the workplace. He became known at Tech Vision Industries for his mentorship of younger employees, particularly in helping them balance professional ambition with personal values. The affair had nearly cost him everything he truly valued. Instead, through painful consequences, honest reckoning, and the grace of a second chance, it had become the catalyst for a more authentic and meaningful life, a cautionary tale transformed into a story of redemption.